Within minutes, myself and my team are able to tell how well our brand and company as a whole is doing by looking at a few primary KPIs that I'll share in this video that have guided our growth of 34% average year over year. My name is Jasim. I'm the CEO and founder of Voadera, a $100 million Amazon e-commerce marketplace company. And this video, I'm going to walk you through why keeping track of KPIs are so important and the exact primary KPIs that we use across every department, from supply chain to finance, to compliance, to marketing, of course, to our company as a whole, that we track and keep an eye on with specific examples that we've used. What are KPIs and why are they so important? So KPIs are key performance indicators, and they're metrics or numbers that you're using to track how well your brand is doing. So I remember a famous saying by Peter Drucker, and this is why they're so important, is what gets measured gets managed. So what you're looking at continuously is what you're going to look at improving. So a famous study they did during Thanksgiving is there's two groups. One group measured their weight daily, and the other one didn't. They just measured at the beginning of the holidays and at the end. And the group that measured it daily didn't gain any weight, but the other group gained 11 pounds. And that's just because having an eye on it, subconsciously, you're doing activities to improve it. But obviously, you want to take it a level further and even improve it. You want to do activities that improve how you're tracking. Is it towards your goals and not towards your goal? One book to open my eye to is actually, let me see my book collection. It's right here, actually. It's Traction by Gino Wickman. He kind of measures, they call them, I forgot what they call them. They use rocks, and I forgot the other term that they use. They don't call them KPIs. They just like using the term KPI. It's more well known. But basically, what it is that you're using these metrics to get a pulse on how your certain aspects of the business are doing. And if something doesn't look right, you're doing a deep dive into that. And I always mention the importance of data visibility because everything starts at data visibility. You want to know how you're doing so you can dive deep into areas where you're falling behind. For example, if your CTR, it matches your entire industry standard benchmark. This is a real example we had. We had a brand that was focusing on their CTR, their main image and their title, but actually their CTR was better than their entire industry average. What was wrong with them is their CVR. Their other secondary images sucked. They didn't convey the checklist. Their premium able content was extremely subpar. So that's where their issue was, because they didn't have the visibility to their data. They were fixing the wrong things. So that's just an example of where KPIs can be so important. You see where you're at. You see also if you're improving it week over week. I like to check them on a weekly basis. I see on a company level, I see the various departments and making sure everything looks healthy. Whatever doesn't, that's when I put a few eyes on it. I ask the team, and whatever does, obviously, on the other hand, I give bonuses, recognition, and that's the way I use them. So now, what are the KPIs that we do track? What are the KPIs that we're tracking? So I'm going to go over these department by department. These are the ones that I'm looking at a high level. These are not all the ones we're looking at. We have much more visibility in our data warehouse, our ERP, but these are the ones that are very doable, and I think the primary ones that'll move the needle for a lot of brands that we work with. So I'll start off with supply chain. Another important concept, actually, before I jump into supply chain, is having countermetrics. It's thanks to this book here, High Output Management, that he talks about countermetrics. So a good example he gives is if you just, let's say you have a brand, right? I'll use a very basic example. If you only measure revenue, what is your employees are going to do? They're going to maximize your tacos. You're going to have a 30-40% tacos, whatever. They're going to spend crazy on ads. They're going to show you great revenue, right? But then what sucks? Your net margin percentage, your profit. And if you only maximize your net margin percentage, they're going to have very low revenue. They're going to make ads very efficient, but you're not going to have it in the middle. So you want to measure the opposites of things. So for example, I'll mention supply chain. We have in-stock rate percentage, but then we also have days of stock, right? So those are opposite. If we only had in-stock percentage, our procurement team, they're going to be incentivized to order 1,000 days of stock, make sure we're always in stock. We're averaging 98.5%, for example, across all of our SKUs. But then what they're going to have bad is days of stock. We're going to have over days of stock. We only want to have 30 to 60 days of stock. And if you only measure days of stock, our in-stock percentage is going to suck because they're going to try to minimize the days of stock. So we're measuring both at the same time. Another one that we like to measure in supply chain is inventory turnover. So basically, how quickly are you cycling through your money? Are you being efficient? How long is the lead time? Making that shorter. Measuring all those things together is something that we found very, very helpful. Let's jump into compliance. So the first one, I think, compliance is buy box win percentage. So now they call it featured offer win percentage, whatever. So there's two reasons you lose the buy box. There's the one reason is it gets suppressed because Amazon saw its lower price on another marketplace or in retail. And the other reason is that there's resellers undercutting you. So our compliance team is responsible for both. They're making sure that we always have the buy box. We have a high buy box win percentage, fighting both of those. And if one of them does happen, we make sure that the other marketplaces are compliant. And if they're not, we open a ticket with Amazon to tell them that basically everything's fine, make sure it's resolved. The next thing that we're looking at is listing suppression rate. So we want to make sure that none of our listings are de-indexed. For example, they don't have one. We just had an example where there was a product that used to sell $10,000 a week, and a competitor hijacked it. Right, it was one of the brands that we work with, and they added adult keyword in there, and it went down. I'm not joking, to $200 a week. It's because it got de-indexed. Thankfully, our compliance team was on it immediately. We fixed it. The sales are back. But that's what happens when you lose organic ranking. So how many listings are suppressed? Organic ranking, is it all healthy? The catalog, everything is up to date basically, and making sure everything's good there. And the third primary one we track for compliance is product rating improvement. So are we suggesting, we're making suggestions to our partner, what product enhancements can we make? What are the reviews, that negative reviews that we're getting? How can we improve them? How can we improve the listing? Are we adding the size charts to make sure all the customers are happy? So the compliance team is primarily responsible for adding the product rating and improving it quarter over quarter. Doesn't matter if we start at 3 stars. I want it to be 3.1 stars next quarter, 3.2 stars a quarter after. Just continuously itching away at it to continuously improve the product rating. For the finance section, I'll keep it fairly simple. There's two primary ones. The first one is cash conversion cycle. This is one of my favorite. This involves how healthy your cash flow is. So basically, it factors everything in. I'd recommend going online, searching how to do this. ChatGPT can help, but it basically, just a simple example. One thing that we work out with the manufacturer, you can get a lot of this with, they call it Sure, I think is what it's called. With the Chinese government gives their factories or there's creditors that give them payment terms. So you can get additional payment terms from a lot of these factories that a lot of people don't know. We're getting, sometimes we work with our partners to get net 60, net 90 days, and even net 120. So if we have a net 120, right, and we're selling the product in 90 days, then we have a negative 30 cash conversion cycle. So the 0 and below is very healthy. That's very hard though. Ideally, you want to be within 30 to 45. That's still extremely healthy, because then you have your cash is basically turning within 30 to 45 days, right? And this has to do with accounts payable. So you have to measure the Amazon. It doesn't pay you right when something is sold. So that's a negative. It pays you after the delivery date by 7 days. And then you have a 2-week pay cycle. And not only that, does everything get sold on the first day? Obviously it doesn't. So you're buying for 30, 45 days. So measuring all in all, what does your cash conversion cycle look like? If you have a healthy cash flow and you don't have issues with cash flow, and this is not something you have to manage, but the bigger you get and the faster you want to grow, because cash is required for growth, the more important this metric becomes. The second one that's also very important, very underlooked, is recovery rate and reimbursements. Usually you want to be between at least 1 to 3% for recovery rate. I made a video on this. I'll link it at the end of the video, or you can find it in the descriptions. But this is basically how much are you claiming from Amazon. So out of every million that you sell on Amazon, you should expect to get $10,000 to $30,000 back from Amazon from loss, damage, false customer returns, all that kind of stuff. I made an entire video breaking down each section, but that's a very important metric that I track, because that 1 to 3% is huge in an inventory-based business, because that could be add 50, 20, 30, 40% to your margins. The next one is marketing. I would say depends on the product that you have. If you have a consumable product, you definitely want to look at the number of subscribers. You want to see that going up. New to brand customers, are you getting new eyes on it? It depends on, this one is the most confusing because it's tough to use generic metrics for this one, because it depends on the stage or life cycle of, compared to other ones that are generic healthy metrics that you want to have. But I would say that I made the 4 growth lever videos that I made. I'll also link it at the end, but it basically walks through the funnel. So the first one you want to be tracking is definitely impressions, then click-through rate, then CVR, and then at the end you want to see AOV and LTV. You want to see that going up. So you want to at least have an eye on those 4 and see which one is the bottleneck, and work on improving that one. I mentioned the example of CTR and CVR. Another example is that a brand was basically having amazing CTR, amazing CVR, but no one was seeing them. So they were continuously paying creative and photography and AI images and everything. But really, all we did is redirect the budget to impressions, their creative budget to impressions and their SEO budget to impressions, and then we saw the brand skyrocket because that was the lever that was needed. And that's the same thing with AOV. I made a coupon video. So how can you increase your AOV so you can afford a higher CAC and all that kind of stuff? Now going into company wide, this is where you want to keep it very high level. You want to measure your top line. What's your revenue? Also, what's your revenue growth rate? You want to measure your bottom line. What is the net profit look like? What does the contribution margin look like on a per SKU edition basis? So that's definitely something you want to try to keep an eye on. Sometimes it's tougher to do on a weekly basis. You have to do monthly reconciliation. There's expenses that are cash basis or accrual basis, but generally you want to understand what the unit economics are on an asset basis, and that's where you're measuring your inventory costs is included in that. You also want to measure tacos. So this is a big one. It's, for me, much more important than measuring ACoS and ROAS, because especially if you're a multi-channel brand and you have influencer, you have TikTok, all that kind of stuff, and you have organic ranking that factors into that. So ACoS and ROAS are still healthy to measure the efficiency of your campaign. We could have measured them in marketing, but I think tacos is a healthier company-wide level thing to look at, to measure, and then seeing from that, obviously, if you have tacos, it could be baked into contribution margin percentage, but that's very healthy as well. And even I would mention on the project manager side of things is on task completion rate. How quickly are your team turning around, like time to resolution, for example? For us, we want the creative team to turn around images in 24 hours, 48 hours for certain images. A video, we want it to be done in 3 days. The SEO content, 1 day as well, depending on the complexity of the listing. So how fast is your team updating things, and are they updating at least on a quarterly basis is some of the stuff to look at. Obviously, we didn't mention stuff like A/B testing for marketing, but that's, like I said, I wanted to focus on the high level brand health, company health type of things to get to make sure that you're continuously assessing the landscape of your brand and knowing where to zoom in for the good and the bad, of course. Amazon is making more and more data available. They're now adding like AMC, brand analytics. It's even SQP. SQP is great, but it's a level in depth after these. So once you're measuring these, then you can measure your organic ranking on a keyword basis, right? You want your marketing team to do that. And that's what we're doing, a lot of this stuff. But you want to make sure you get the basics straight, and then you continuously delve in deeper. You don't want to get overwhelmed, not focus on what's priority, and not get to anything anyway. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to watch, again, I'm going to link the recovery rate reimbursement video and the other video about the 4 growth levers. And make sure to give it a like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications to continue seeing these type of videos, and come check us out at Voadera.com if you're a brand doing over $1 million and looking to grow your company.